is our no-sew flower tie blanket. You'll want to line up all of the edges, and then you'll usually have one edge that doesn't necessarily line up in a nice pretty way. This edge, we're going to take at least one of the colors. You can use both colors if you'd like. And we're going to cut an inch in all the way down the length of the blanket. This is the stretchy side of the fleece versus the salvage edge that doesn't stretch. Now that we've cut an inch all the way down, we're going to take this and we're going to cut this in half. Don't worry about this being perfect. This is going to be what you're using for your ties. If it's just a little bit skinnier or a little bit fatter than the next tie, it's not really going to change much. Now you'll have 2 strips of fabric about 1/2 inch wide, and I like to cut mine about 2.5 to 3 inches long. The longer the ties, the easier it is for you to tie later on. However, you will have to cut off scraps unless you want long hanging pieces. And this means that you may end up needing more than just the 2 strips, so I like to keep mine a little shorter. This next part you're gonna have to get a little creative with. We're going to be making rectangles. We want them to be about 3 inches wide and about 2.5 inches deep. However, the very corners we want to be slightly shallower in their width, but not the cut in. And that this is going to be more apparent later. So you may have to slightly adjust, but don't worry too much. It's not particularly noticeable unless you make a significant difference, like a 3 inch and then like a 1.5 inch would be a bit significant. As long as they're close, you won't really notice. So for this corner, we're going to go about 2.5 inches from the corner itself and about 2 inches deep. And then the same can be said for this other corner, about 2.5 inches across and about 2 inches deep. This will leave you with a still attached corner. You do not want to completely detach this corner. So now from here, we're going to take about 2.5 to 3 inches and about the same depth that we did on this corner. All the way down, all the sides.
I was having issues mathing.
Next, we're going to be taking our rectangles and we're going to be cutting in. So if you imagine this to be separated into thirds, you're going to cut in 1/3 from one side, leave a third uncut, and then cut in a third from the other side. Doing this, I found it's easier to cut whichever direction is easier for you, and then flip the whole blanket around and cut the other direction, because my arms don't bend that way. When you're cutting, make sure to cut through both layers of material, not just one. It is okay if you miss up and just get the one layer. You can always go back and fix it at a later time if need be. I hit pause, 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 pause. Perfect. It is best if you can prevent little notches and try to get it as straight as possible. In the end result, these little notches will be a little bit more noticed if you're looking closely at the ties, or between the ties technically. But of course, if they're there, it's not the biggest deal, and you can always trim them down if you got a really steady and precise hand. Next, in the area between where you didn't cut, where it's still attached, we're going to create a slit. I find this to be easily done if you flip it over and then take your scissors and slice it down. Like so. Now we show the tie itself to get the flower tie. So you're going to have your cut up square. You're going to feed your tie piece through the slit that you created. Now I like to hold it flat as I twist the square. It's okay if it bunches a little bit, let it do that. But we're going to twist it so the opposite side is facing, and then we're going to squinch it down so that we can take both ends of the tie and tie it into a double knot. The longer you have it, the ties themselves, this is where it's going to be a little easier for your fingers. And this is also why we have it on the stretch, is so that when you tie it, it's a little bit, it lets you pull it down taut. So now that you have it in this position, I like to move the knot of the tie more to a central location. And then I pull the bow that it creates open so you can see each color. Now you'll notice that if you lay the fabric flat, it'll automatically turn the bow. So depending on how you twist your piece will change which side, which color will be on. And you just do this all the way around. When it comes to cutting the corners, you'll have a small opening left over. You'll fold it, but don't fold it so that that small spot is taut. Leave a little bit of room, and then go ahead and make your slit into this. The corners are going to be done the same way as the regular bows. You're going to first feed your tie through. Then holding that down, you're going to spin the colors so that the opposite color is on top. You're going to squish the fabric down so that you can tie your knot. Doesn't matter how you squish the fabric, by the way, as long as you can get your tie done, because you're going to fluff it up at the end anyways. Make yourself a double knot.
Pardon the fat fingers. Does it matter if the point is in there or not?
Nope, it's okay because we're going to stretch it out. So the corners are going to look slightly different because you are doing, instead of just having these edges, you'll have more of a diamond shape instead of a square shape. But you're still going to fluff it, and it's not going to be particularly noticeable compared to anything else. If you forget to make the twist when you flip the colors, your bow is going to want to sit with the same color on the same side and not sit on the side. That twist is what allows both colors to be seen, and not just a regular bow tie where the same color is going to be seen on both sides. So that twist is going to be vital if you want it to be the flower versus just like a bow tie type of tie. Pro tips: when you're making the slit, you would like the top of the slit to end just before or at the same line it comes across, more like this one does. That means that when you put the tie in and you make the twist, when it's deeper in, like this one, it'll try to pull your tie around when you make the flip. When it's not to that twist point, which is going to be where you're cutting in at, it keeps the tie a little bit more stable. I would also recommend before cutting to measure your sides so that you can have an idea on how wide you want to cut. That way you're not cutting 3 inches all the way across and then get down to 1 inch left over. You can adjust as you go to get the size that you need all the way across to be somewhat similar. So when I fluff the flower, I like to pull each edge across and then grab both of the little stymon ties and try and get that centered as much as possible. You see you usually lay on whichever side you tie it, so you just kind of grab it and pull it across a little bit, then tug each of the sides, and that gives you your little flower appearance. Note to self, or to all of you watching, do at least an 1.5 inch cut at the very beginning, possibly 2 inches to get 3 or 4 strips for your ties. We were able to do the short end, the long end, and most of the other short end before we ran out. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to use the salvage that we cut off before we started recording. Lucky for us, we cut the salvage about 3 inches wide, which means that we can make our strips 1/2 inches this way and still have the stretch. If you did not, and you have to use your salvage edge and it's too thin to be used as strips, you'll want to cut them longer, possibly 4 or 5 inches long, and then you'll just have to trim because it does not stretch the other direction. You won't have the elasticity in order to be able to tie it the same way we were able to tie the other ones. Bonus pro tip. When you leave your project for, life, and you come back to it and you're trying to figure out which direction you were twisting in order to make your bows, the best way to figure it out is whatever color you have on top, what direction that is on your bow or on your fluffed bow is going to be the direction in which you turn it. So because the yellow is on the left, we're going to rotate it left in order to tie it. So we would spin this around. When you have more than one hand, it makes it a lot easier holding this recording device. And then you tie it, and it'll end up with the same color on the same side all the way across. If you're alternating which direction, you'll do the same thing, just obviously the opposite way. When I mentioned being careful on your slits in either direction to make your rectangles, it's because you will see in between your bows, you'll be able to see that or the extra little notches. Like I said, they're not particularly noticeable, but if you have the same level of OCD I do, you will see them. And of course, you can always go back and trim them off if you have a steady hand and if you care enough to. The finished results, we're going to have the bow ties that are fluffed and how they look. You'll see them best on the edges, but of course you'll see the colors on either side. The difference being these ones have been fluffed, so these are more of the flower appearance, as opposed to these ones which we have not fluffed, so we could show you the difference in how they look. They're a little bit more uniformed in color until you get to the corner piece. And the same will be said for the opposite side. You have more of the same color visible than you do when they are fluffed. And there you have it. That is how we did our flower tied blanket. Leave a comment if you have any questions and we'll do the best that we can to answer you. Thanks for watching and stay crafty.